Good afternoon, Charles.
Good afternoon, Dan. How are you?
I am excellent.
It's very noisy. Where are you?
I'm in a booth with you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The HubSpot Podcast Network booth.
Yeah, so we are at Podcast Movement 2022. We decided to blow some of our moderately hard-earned income on traveling to Dallas to learn how to be better at doing podcasts and all that entails.
And hopefully this new equipment is helping with that.
Yeah, this is some fancy. We're on somebody else's microphones with somebody else's headphones, recording in somebody else's board. So this is fancier than the stuff that we usually work with at the one home in the suburbs of Lake Mary and a trailer next to the St. Johns River in Volusia County.
Minor upgrade.
Yeah, minor upgrade, but. Yeah, we'll see. And we don't know how much of the background noise is going to come through, but we are on the exhibitors hall at the convention, so you can probably hear some of the foot traffic and the noise from outside. But this is pretty great. We're at the Sheridan Hotel in downtown Dallas. Today is Wednesday, and we'll be here I'm here through Friday. Dan, you're coming home Sunday, right?
I am.
And hoping to pick up a lot of stuff on both the sort of creative side and the business side of having a podcast. Maybe someday it'll become a business and not just a creative endeavor.
The networking here is unbelievable, though. That's one of the things that I picked up on Podfest in Orlando when I was there, and it just casual conversations, complaining about something like a line, lead to really interesting interactions. Yeah,
we met some cool people yesterday, and everybody's so friendly, and everybody wants to know what you do, what you're into, and what your podcast is about, and what you do for the pod. Yeah, everybody just is happy to ask questions and share their own experience, which is pretty cool.
Really is, and it's nice. I don't know if I told that story when we went to Podfest, but I was blown away by how easy it was to talk to people. And somebody pulled me aside and said, this is what they do for a living. They talk to people, they interview people. So of course, it's a lot more natural than a lot of the IT conventions that we've been to.
Yeah, definitely a different set of soft skills between the IT crowd and the podcasting community.
And, that's the one thing that I like, because it's intimidating. This is, for us, we're still really new here and doing this podcast, and we are, kind of going through our own imposter syndrome and trying to figure stuff out, being average Joes and not having a background in any of this. And being welcomed and having such a friendly and supportive community, at each of these events makes it so much easier for us to find some confidence and find some great ideas and feel like, we're motivated. We can, this is nice.
Yeah, and all these people are just like us. They step into their limousines and helicopters one leg at a time, just like we do, Dan.
I know what you're talking about. I jump into my copter.
We get to use this booth here to record an episode, and so we're going to use an hour and talk about, an upcoming series that we're planning on doing is going through some of the more popular, more downloaded TED Talks on YouTube and on TED's platform, and sort of just react to them and talk about what we find value in. And the first one we're going to start with today is by author Liz Plank, who wrote a book that I read recently called For the Love of Men. And it's very interesting to hear a woman and a feminist talk about masculinity and the challenges that she sees men having to live through and deal with. And I really appreciated her perspective from both the audio book that I listened to, as well as the video that we found on YouTube called How to Be a Man, which is an interesting title for a TED Talk by a woman. But I found it very compelling, and Dan and I just spent 10 minutes or so, 10 or 12 minutes watching it in his hotel room yesterday and having some discussions about it, and we thought, hey, this would be good to cover on the podcast.
Yeah, especially her perspective. She's a pretty strong feminist in terms of a lot of her views, and
absolutely.
So that her perspective is unique and it's a little bit different than I think most people would assume.
Yeah, I like how she basically she talked about how women were able to find direction through the feminist revolution, where sort of the role of women in a modern society, not just a hunter-gatherer society from 10,000 years ago, but in a modern society, women went through the feminist revolution, were able to arrive at a conclusion of, okay, if you want to, be a high-powered executive, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, if you want to, whatever you want to do, you now get to make those choices, and all of those are okay. You can pick whichever path you'd like for yourself, and society is going to, at various levels, obviously, depending on what your culture is and where you live. But in the West, as a whole, society is going to support you in making those decisions and going down those paths. And in a lot of ways, she points out that men have really never had a revolution like that, where we're still running off the old software from the hunter-gatherer mentality of what's expected of men and what men have to do if they want to be considered a quote-unquote real man, right?
Exactly. And what she did was she went to Washington Square Park in New York City with Esther Perel, who I hadn't heard of before.
Oh, she's great.
And yeah, so she's I checked out her website. She really focuses on relationships, both personal and work related relationships. And I believe she's a psychologist as well. And they set up a booth in Washington Square Park where they had a sign out that said free advice for men from women, and wanted to interview different men as they came along and ask them a few questions.
Yeah, I was thinking about if I was walking around Washington Square Park and I saw a sign like that, what would be the question that I would ask them? And well, first of all, if I didn't know it was Liz Plank and Esther Perel, I wouldn't ask them anything.
Well, actually, I think that the sign said free advice for men from women. So I would run to hear, hey, what? Wow, this is
So what question?
I would run to hear.
What question would you say? Like, how would you ask them for their advice? What is it you would say if prompted in that manner?
What do you think you should? What do you think I should know that I don't?
That is exactly what I came up with. Seriously, we didn't talk about this in advance.
No, really?
But no, my question would be, statistically, based on my demographics, have a look at me, look at, my age, my ethnicity, my amazing physique. What is it that you think I should probably know that I don't know?
Yeah.
And I would be curious to hear what their answer was.
Yeah.
But from the way she described it, that was not the typical question or the prompt that most men gave her.
Right. I think the advice was you need to get lost.
Right. And I like that she introduced it that way. And one of the things that she mentions in her book, For the Love of Men, again, is and it can be a little bit of a cliche and a little bit of a sitcom trope, the idea of the guy who gets lost driving somewhere and refuses to stop and ask for directions. And we talked about this a little bit last night, and the interesting thing I find when I think about that, and look, I'm guilty of that too. Not so much anymore that we all have GPS on our phones, Apple Maps or Google Maps or Waze or whatever. We get lost less frequently than we used to back in the day when we would print out the MapQuest directions and then use that to figure out where we were going, or pop open the Rand McNally Atlas. The giant atlas that we used to take on road trips when I was a kid.
Yeah, I remember.
But so getting lost isn't quite the same as it was back then as far as, with getting in the car and going on a road trip. But I certainly would have, I would hesitate to stop and ask for directions. I would assume that I can figure it out. I can get back on the right trail. I don't need to ask somebody. And what we brought up last night was the idea of, as men, do we hate getting lost? Or do we hate people knowing that we're lost? And kind of what I settled on was, look, if we hate being lost, then the first thing we're going to do the second we realize that we're lost is try to fix that problem and do whatever we have to not be lost anymore.
Right.
But if we hate appearing lost, then what we're going to do is we're going to double down on whatever it is that we're already doing and try to hide from people the fact that we're lost.
Yeah, and as you're saying this, I just thought of something, that it's more likely that we just hate appearing lost because in general, because we like to figure things out a lot of times. We like to fix things, and that's part of, I feel like, the traditional sense of masculinity is improving your masculinity is I can figure things out. I can fix things, right?
Right.
And you know what? We still get lost, and you tell me if this is the case. I know it is for me. A lot of times I'll go into stores looking for something, and if I'm there with my girlfriend at the time, a lot of times I will look through all of the store, through the different shelves and everything else like that before asking somebody for help.
Yeah.
She'll go right to somebody and go, hey, I'm looking for this. And, somebody who works there. So, yes, we don't get lost via GPS anymore, but we do. I still get lost, and I still probably spend a little bit. I eventually will ask for where something is if I can't find it. But I like to look first. I like to spend some time looking for it first.
Yes, I agree.
I don't go right to somebody who works there.
Yeah, and that's the question. So if you're in a rush, if you have to run in just to get that one item, how do you weigh those values in your mind of I want to get in and out of here as fast as I possibly can versus I want to just figure it out on my own and not ask somebody for help.
I know what my default is. I'm going to look for a couple of minutes until I start to feel anxious, and I'm like, okay, I'm running out of time.
Right.
And that anxiety needs to reach a certain level before I'm like, okay, I got to ask somebody.
And why are we that way? I mean, because that is not not efficient. You can't say efficiency is my number one goal and still behave that way because clearly it's not.
No. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, it's that sense of independence, I guess, and that sense of I don't need somebody else to.
And I'm wondering if it's like a hunter-gatherer thing where we're on the hunt, right? I mean, it's not for an animal, or for food, but it's for a product. It's for something that we need.
Yeah, but that is the thing. It flies in the face of being the most effective and being the most efficient hunter or shopper or driver.
Correct.
It's like
it's not the most efficient. Absolutely right.
We don't get to claim that all we care about is being the most efficient and then engage in this behavior over and over again where we slow ourselves down and get in our own way. So, and the same thing will certainly apply to mental health. You can't say that being healthy and being efficient at managing your feelings and your emotions and your thoughts and your states is the most important thing to you if you're not willing to ask for directions, right?
Right. And I think, her analogy here with getting lost and asking for directions is getting uncomfortable when it comes to talking about mental health and issues as well. Is we need to be okay and find ways to be able to talk about things that are going on with us, especially to other men, where that's not what we're doing now. And she actually said that one of the most emasculating things to do is to really say, hey, I'm lost, and ask for directions. And, that same feeling a lot of times will happen, in areas where men get together.
Right. And that's kind of the question. So if stopping and asking for directions, whether it's because you're driving or because, you're dealing with something that feels a little too big and it's causing stress and anxiety in your life, if that feels emasculating, then what's the problem? Is the problem that it feels emasculating and it shouldn't, or that it actually is emasculating? And I think the problem is that it feels emasculating, but it actually isn't. And we've gotten messages and we've gotten programming, whether that's from our society, from our parents, from our buddies, whoever it is. We're getting messages that get in the way of this manly, self-sufficient, efficient life that we claim is our number one priority, but we've adopted behaviors that prevent us from actually having that life that we want.
Right. And she makes the point that a lot of times it's not this sense of needing to feel masculine, this traditional masculinity. It's not in front of women, it's in front of other men. Right.
Yeah, and that's, where you bring in the locker room mentality of the kind of, showing off and the kind of discussion that can sort of breed in those places. Now, I don't really identify with that much, certainly anymore. I mean, I'm in my mid-40s, and now the only thing that concerns me in the locker room is not seeing things I don't want to see and not smelling things I don't want to smell. And, just striking up conversations in the locker room at the gym where I'm talking about my, how much money I make or my prowess with the ladies. That's the farthest thing from my mind. I have absolutely no interest in that, but it's still it still is something that's real, that's out there. That, I mean, a few years ago when Trump was running for president, that tape of him, talking about all the things that he was entitled to because of his wealth and his celebrity, he just wrote it off as, it was just locker room talk, which, how the hell would he know what locker room talk is? The guy doesn't look like he's set foot on locker room in his whole life.
And one of the points she talks about is that this is called precarious masculinity, where we have this feeling where we need to continually prove our masculinity, whereas women don't have to continually prove their femininity.
Right, and it results. I mean, they have, like we talked about before, they have more flexibility in the feminine life that they choose to live out than men often do. Because we do feel like masculinity is a performance that we have to engage in every single day, day after day, and if we stop performing it for a day, then we wake up tomorrow feeling and looking less masculine than we do today. And she talked about it, trying to blow up a pool float that basically has a hole in it, where as long as you're constantly exhaling into that pool float, then maybe it'll look like it's still got enough air in it to keep you on top of the water. But the second you pass out or take a break from blowing in it, it's going to be very clear that no, you've got a raft with a hole in it.
Yeah, and this is actually backed up. So I actually I Googled what precarious masculinity is, and I actually found a definition from Psychology Today.
Okay.
And in that article, it actually talked about a pretty broad study that was done with 33,000 university students across 62 different nations.
Okay.
And what they did was they asked the students to rate on a scale of 1 to 7, 7 being they agree with the most, 1 disagree, 4 questions. Or 4 statements.
Okay.
Do you agree or disagree with this? Other people often question whether a man is a real man. Number 2, some boys do not become men no matter how old they get. Number 3, do I agree with, is it fairly easy for a man to lose his status as a man? Number 4, manhood is not assured, it could be lost. So that basically they said was most across those 33,000 students, the global average was 4.1. So more people agreed with all of those statements that basically masculinity is not something that is, that it can be lost. And the United States was higher than most at 4.4. So there were a few that like some of the European nations were a little bit less. They disagreed a little bit more.
I imagine Scandinavia would probably
exactly. That was Yeah. They said like Finland especially. Yeah. But they basically said that these stronger beliefs in precarious masculinity, they were associated with higher levels of gender inequality, as indicated by gender-based disparities in education, wealth, and health. Whereas stronger, and also the stronger beliefs were also associated with lower levels of human development, as indicated by years of schooling and standard of living. So that's interesting because we've been working on a little bit of our motto or our
defining what we're about,
mission statement,
exactly,
right? Where basically in a world of healthy men is a more secure and supportive world for everyone. Right. So this really kind of supports what we came up with on our own, or I say you kind of came up with. Thank you, and I would say that it only makes sense. I mean, it does seem intuitive that if half of your population is spending all of their time feeling like they're living under a microscope where everybody is constantly evaluating and judging whether they're good enough for whatever that means to the society that you live in, that stress is going to translate into worse outcomes for everybody in that society. And it's an unreasonable amount of pressure that we often put on ourselves, and unreasonable standards that we feel like we have to live up to on a daily basis. And it's going to lead to bad outcomes for everybody. It's so much better to just decide who you want to be and then be that person and then be comfortable with that, instead of putting on living your whole life on a stage where you're constantly having to write for this character that is the version of you that you want the world to see, and react based on, okay, how are other men going to think I'm behaving? Is it good enough? Is it man enough? And women too. I mean, it's not just other, like she says in this video that that guys, our problem is not
the problems that women create for us, but that is some of it. The problem that other men create for us. It's, if you're living your life performing for the other men and women in your life, then that doesn't leave much space for you to have the life that you want to have, because you are going to be too concerned about the job, the body, the vacation home, the car, all that stuff, because you're carefully crafting this persona that you think will get approval from the people around you, instead of just doing the stuff that you want to every day. And thankfully, the older I'm getting, my life is starting to line up more and more with the kind of life I want to live than the kind of life that I think other people expect me to live.
Yeah, and that's especially tough when, the men, when we hang out in typical environments like locker room where men gather, those types of values that you just talked about, are really, we're not getting support in terms of figuring out who we should be as men. We're getting more, more pressure to act like little boys, talk about the stereotypical a real man type of environments, and they actually found, by talking to the men in the park, that they had a lot of insecurities and worries that they really didn't talk to other men about. And it's because they probably just didn't have environments or opportunities presented to them to be able to feel comfortable talking and actually feeling weak talking about those things to people.
Yeah, and I think that I'm a mix of lucky and it's also kind of an expected outcome where, now that I'm at the age that I'm at and I've got the friends that I have, I do feel comfortable talking about those things to you, to Rob, to Kurt, to Richard, to guys like that, and being able to share those things. And I never feel discouraged from that. And so it's both a matter of luck and it's a matter of curation. I've curated a friend group where we can talk about those things, and we're encouraged to talk about those things. And the second, I get somebody in, my mid to inner circle that gets freaked out or uncomfortable talking about real life stuff, then that person's going to work their way out of my inner circle without me having to make any conscious choice. It's like, if we get into a conversation, at Mathers one night about anxiety or stress or expectation, and, we've got a friend that, balks at that or gets uncomfortable, or, God help him, he tries to make fun of me for it, which is going to work out way worse for him than me. You've seen me when I flip the switch before, where I feel like I'm getting some judgment or some pressure when I'm trying to be honest and open about my feelings, and then I just have a tendency to lash out a little bit with that wit that I keep in my back pocket at all times. So but that person will work their way out of my inner circle when they decide that, oh no, I'm not comfortable with you talking about your vulnerability or your feelings around me. It's like, okay, well, you can feel that way, but next time that discussion happens, you're not going to be around.
Right. Yeah. And again, you've needed to curate that, because Liz talks about this in the video, how a lot of times if two guys go out and enjoy dinner together completely platonically, the term that's thrown around is bromance. It needs to be somehow feminized for it to be acceptable. And then we talked about that yesterday, and you used the other term, mandate, right? Why does it need to be that way? And then we thought about it. It's like, well, okay, so what if two guys go out to a bar and they sit next to each other and they're watching sports? That's not a bromance. That's not a mandate.
Right.
What is that? And then you mentioned also, we talked about that it's like that third object or third party that needs to be there to kind of, I guess, buffer the connection that two guys can have. Right.
The TV with football on it, the dead fish or the dead deer. It's like they're always. It's not enough.
Explain the dead fish and the dead deer thing.
Yeah. So I don't know if we did that on we've talked about it on a previous episode. Okay. The idea that so many guys have pictures on dating apps with a dead deer or dead fish, because they feel too self-conscious to just say to their buddy, hey, we're out having a good time, take my picture. It's like, no, that's not okay. That's indulgent. That's weird in some way. But if I say, hey, Dan, take my picture with this fish I just caught, then suddenly it becomes fine.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of an explanation for why, you look on a dating app at guys' profiles, which I've never done. Just, I hear my women friends complain about it enough, though.
Of course.
That, there's so many pictures with the guy holding the deer or holding the fish, because they're just too uncomfortable to say, hey, buddy, take my picture. I feel like I'm looking good tonight.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that's not a problem I have.
Right. But yeah, and one of the points that Liz makes is that this is a problem in terms of the way men talk to each other and the way men foster their relationships. Women don't really have that problem. They have close, intimate relationships with each other, non-sexually intimate, obviously. So where they feel like they can really be themselves and talk about things. Men are less likely to do that, and as we age, in terms of men, we tend to have less friends. We tend to, and there was a study out of the UK that said 2.5 million men have no close friends. And that isolation, that's not good. Being, sitting there with our own thoughts, and then the places where we do gather, the mere suggestion of having some sort of insecurities or worries or fears, if that's brought up, that's like you said, they make fun of that, and so now it really is just reinforcing that you need to keep it inside. And what happens when you bottle things up for too long? They eventually explode in bad ways, and it could be stress, it could be detrimental to your health, a lot of different ways.
Yeah, so again, let me reiterate, the video that we're watching that Liz Plank did as a TED Talk was called How to Be a Man. It may have been How to Be a Man by a Woman, or I don't remember what the full title of it was, but just Google How to Be a Man, Liz Plank, TED Talk, and you'll find it. And we should give you a heads up that I have listened to the audiobook for The Love of Men by Liz Plank. I loved it. I thought it was great. I didn't see, some of the stuff made me think a little hard. Some stuff I didn't see completely eye to eye with her, but it's extremely valuable. And I really enjoyed listening to her read the book. I got the hard copy of the book, and Dan has purchased the audiobook as well. And so it won't be our next book, but a book or 2 or 3 from now, we are certainly going to cover it. And so if you want to rethink masculinity and the effect that societal pressure is having on guys, whether you're talking about suicide or opiate addiction or just there's a reason that things are rough on guys right now, and it's not just because the girl I liked didn't like me back, and so now I'm mad about it. It's a little bit bigger and a little more insidious than that, I think.
Yeah, and she mentions that her solution at the end of the talk really is to reclaim these spaces where men gather. Yeah. And instead of turning men back into boys, we really teach boys how to become men. Yeah. And that's all well and good, but that's not really a tangible, how do you make that happen? How do you remove that stigma? How do you make guys comfortable in those types of spaces? And ironically, before this TED Talk, I was looking for other TED Talks to talk about. And one of them I found was about, it's called How Barbershops Can Keep Men Healthy. And it was by Dr. Joseph Ravenel. Okay. And he basically, the TED Talk is about how barbershops traditionally have been safe havens for men of color, and they've gone there and they see their barbers every 2 weeks, and they tell them things that they wouldn't tell anybody else. And a lot of the conversation he remembers growing up as a kid was around health, around physical health. Okay. And a lot of it was around how high blood pressure is the number one killer of black men, right? Across the United States, and it's due to not eating well. It's stress, and a lot of times they don't end up going to doctors because traditionally doctors, through insurance programs, they spend 10 minutes with you. They just lecture at you. They don't actually have a conversation with you. So they didn't really go to their doctors either. So a lot of the conversation that around health happened at these barbershops growing up as a kid. So he's like, well, how can I work on this? And it was brilliant. As a doctor now, he goes into barbershops and checks people's blood pressure.
That's awesome.
Because they feel comfortable there. Yeah. They feel safe there. And so I was like, wait a minute. This is a great idea. Why can't we do this for mental health too? And I'm sure there's some mental health conversations that go on at barbershops, but what if there are other venues, I don't know how it really work, but maybe during sports games at bars or, different venues where, guys typically gather and gather regularly, they feel safe. maybe there's some things we can do to talk about some mental health things, like low level stuff, not shove it down their throats, whatever, but just make it a little bit more casual. So we've got that third party presence there of whatever that is, that sports event or whatever. But then there's a little bit of heart to heart talk that can happen, and express some of their insecurities and things that they're worried about. So I don't know. I just sort of had a brainstorm about it, and when I read that, when I listened to the last part of this video, but there's a lot in this video that is really valuable.
Yeah, I would say the one of the takeaways, as far as you and I are always on the lookout for action items, like what can I actually do to implement this or try it out. I mean, if you have a group of guy friends, and unless you're one of the 2.5 million guys in the UK, unfortunately, who doesn't, I would say give it a try to reveal something to a close friend that's going on inside you that you normally wouldn't have the impulse to share. And go easy at first. I mean, don't, I'm not asking you to take an unreasonable or a crazy amount of risk that, you think could really set somebody off or trigger them or make them, not want to hang out with you anymore. But just try stretching a little bit and share something with somebody that you're close to that you normally wouldn't share, and put it out there. Try not to make it a joke. Try not to undo it as soon as you do because you feel uncomfortable, but put something out there when you're sober, not when you're drunk. I mean, I think we have friends who, once they have a couple drinks in them, they start sharing things and they get very huggy and maybe a little weepy. But don't do it in a way where you get to then write it off the next day to say that, oh, I just, I got a little out of control and shared something I didn't want to. Like, yeah, in a sober, serious time, share something with somebody that you normally wouldn't share, put it out there and see what happens.
And this is something that I've kind of developed, and I see actually, Kurt's done this with us as well, is, frame it in terms of, hey, can I get a piece of advice? You know, you don't have to make it this, huge deal. And I think most people can at least acknowledge that we're not experts in everything, and everybody has their own experiences, and they can, I believe you can learn something from everybody. And so if there's something that you admire in somebody else, you see them doing something the right way, they've got some healthy relationships, or you see them professionally they're doing really well, and you're concerned about your job maybe, and people like to help. Generally speaking, people they feel that makes them feel valued. So don't be afraid to ask for advice. And I think it actually shows that you're a stronger person rather than you can't figure it out. I think it's unrealistic to think that everybody's got everything figured out all the time, and I think you're fooling yourself, you're fooling other people, or you're trying to, and that doesn't look good. So
exactly.
Just be strong and say, hey, look, I need some help, and you can phrase it in a way, like I said, I love saying, hey, can I get a piece of advice?
Yeah, you can, and that always, I mean, setting the table that way by saying, hey, I'd like to get your perspective on something.
Good one, yeah.
I'd like to get your advice on something. That also, sets that person up as, oh, my friend thinks I might have something valuable to share with them, and that definitely
it's a compliment.
It's a compliment, and it gets them more ready to feel like, oh, they care about what I might think about something.
And also, you don't have to take the advice. You don't have to agree with their perspective.
Yeah, and I've had plenty of friends ask my advice and ignore it, and that's what they get to do, and I'll still keep sharing it anyway. I mean, that's completely fine. I ask people for advice. I mean, it used to drive my ex crazy when we'd be going somewhere where we were getting dressed up, and I would show her 2 or 3 neckties. I'm like, which one do you think I should wear? And I almost never went with the one that she suggested, and it drove her nuts. But so to the point where I started saying, okay, look, I may not go with the one that you suggest, but I would like to get your perspective on which one do you think looks better and why. And that's something that unless you constantly ignore their advice, they're going to appreciate you asking.
Okay, so I need to dig in a little here.
All right, please do.
What information did she provide that led you to choose something different?
I was probably just being a contrarian. I mean, I don't know.
So you're just trying to make a joke? Is that really?
I don't know that I was trying to make a joke about it, but it was probably I probably already had my mind up, and I was just looking for somebody to confirm my opinion for me.
Got it. Okay.
I mean, whatever it was, at the root of it was immaturity, I'm sure, because
Okay.
you know,
All right.
I don't know exactly what form of immaturity it was, but I'm sure, yeah, that's God willing something that I've outgrown at least at some level.
Just out of curiosity, would it ever have been maybe you were a little upset by something between the two of you, and this was kind of your way at poking at her a little bit?
I hope not, but maybe.
I mean, I can't look. I'm not saying I haven't done stupid things like that, but
yeah,
I'm just curious.
Yeah, the fact that it happened enough to frustrate her means there was probably something going on that I wasn't aware of, and I don't know exactly what it was, but yeah, it wasn't helpful. I know that.
No,
I don't know exactly what motivated it, but it was definitely something that grated on her, and I completely get why. I'd be the same way. I would if you kept asking my advice on something, Dan, and you never. And it wasn't just like a big like life thing. It was just like, hey Charles, what color shirt should I wear tonight? Wear the blue one. No, I'm going to wear the red one. And that happened like over and over again.
Yeah, right. So that's a little bit of a I don't want to say that's a covert contract, but it's more kind of like I don't want to discuss what's really bothering me. So let's just poke the bear a little bit here.
Maybe I don't know.
Let's aggravate you. I'm upset about something, so I'm going to make you upset about something too. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be, or we could just have had dramatically different aesthetic tastes, and I would always think that one way to go was the way that she didn't think that. I don't know,
right.
But I think it's more likely that there was something childish and immature going on my part.
Gotcha.
That seems like the most likely source. I don't know, but all right. So what do we got? We got 4 or 5 more breakouts today.
Yep.
At least three more.
Yep.
And hopefully we'll continue learning things that make us better at this podcasting game that we've been playing since December.
And we'd love to hear some feedback on this upgraded equipment, if it's any better than what we normally are talking on. If it's worth spending all of our life savings on upgraded equipment.
Oh God, please say it's not, because I don't want to. All right, Dan, anything else?
No, this was great, man.
All right, so look for a link to Liz Plank's TED Talk in the show notes for this episode. We're planning on releasing this on our normal Monday schedule. We're recording this on a Wednesday, so we should have, when I get home on Saturday morning, early, I should have plenty of time to get this ready to go so that we can give you the Monday morning episode you've grown accustomed to.
Fantastic. All right, man.
Well, all right, thanks, Dan.
Thank you. All right, Charles.
Bye.
Bye-bye.